And has television realized its power to actually make practical change? So I'm obsessed by telly. I do nothing but watch television.
Well, you do it well.
And the don't miss Colin from accounts, and nobody wants this. And and there are so many amazing shows which have been about incredibly important issues. And I always say to make things happen, you have to make things. But once we've made things...
What happens after?
Yeah, are we making the things that we've made make the things that they should make happen?
Yeah.
That's my question.
Yeah. And is it by design enough? Because sometimes good things happen after, but that wasn't necessarily the intention.
Exactly. I think we should be looking at mechanisms, mindset, and money.
Yeah.
Because I don't really think...
3 M's, everyone. Do you remember that?
I just wonder whether or not it's on the top of, or anywhere enough on the agenda of people who are in film and in television to actually say, I've got this extraordinary thing, now how can I use it?
Yeah, totally.
I think a lot of people make amazing things and then just hope for the best. It's as though they run the race and then don't pick up the award. Now, can I just say, there are a lot of people doing a lot of things. The more I look into it, the more I realize how much is happening. But I still think it's not at the core or one of the core tenets of broadcasters. And that's what we want to chat through today.
And I'd be interested to hear from you why you think that is. Because if you look at business in general, particularly consumer-led brands and products, we've seen the rise of B Corps, we've seen the rise of products that give 10% to charity, etc., and it being actually good for their bottom line.
Yeah.
Why don't you think this is happening enough in our industry?
Well, I think there are lots of issues. I mean, I've got here the brilliant Ofcoms thing for the BBC, which says it is essential when highlighting areas that the BBC does not appear to be advocating any political solution or actively encouraging any public campaign or lobby. So there are pretty strict things, particularly on the BBC.
How did you get around it then with all the stuff you've done?
Well, exactly. But I think, and I've been talking to a lot of people in our business, and actually they're more flexible to the idea than they ever have been. And I'm not sure, as it were, the rules are always the best. Always the best rules, but it isn't, so just on the B Corps, for instance, I've been talking to businesses about the Sustainable Development Goals, the Millennium Development Goals for years. In 2005, I could not get a conversation with anyone in business when we did Live 8. Wow. Honestly, we had 2 meetings, and in both of them, they looked at me like I was Che Guevara, and I'm very much not.
And that was 2005.
Yeah, wow. And now, 2015, it could be said in the last 10 years, businesses have done more in a more committed way for the Sustainable Development Goals than politicians have. And you see whole businesses.
Media.
Yeah, and that's the question. You see whole businesses that have gone from corporate social responsibility, which was a couple of token things where you'd say, well, we put a bit of our money into this lovely project, to responsible social corporations. And they actually align everything that they do, and they change each one of their, Unilever changes every product to make sure that the supply chains and everything are right. You genuinely see businesses saying it's our business not only to make money and satisfy our shareholders, but actually to change the world. And I wonder whether broadcasting, which used to be so far ahead, so progressive, has actually not thought seriously enough about, I mean, I'm just going to give the one, as it were, obvious thing, which is when you watch a program with passionate or disturbing subject matter, all of you will know that at the end they say, if you have been affected or concerned by this issue, call this number.
Helpline or whatever.
They never say, if you want to do something about this issue, if you would like to get involved. If you watch something about pension poverty, they say, if you've been affected by, or about domestic violence, not you can help. There are lots of really great sort of call centers and things that you can do in your local community. They don't say that. They say, if you're a victim, do something, but they don't see it as their job to suggest that the people who are watching actually could do something about it.
Do you think that's easier with commercial television or film rather than PSBs, as you
Well, I don't know. I
described?
mean, I don't know about the rules, and you'll have to forgive me for being smoking on facts, but I'm actually told that the best people on this are PBS, or the Public Broadcasting
Right.
System in America.
Yes.
And ABC in Australia, I'm told, are very, very strong on this. So I think that we're in a period of transition, and what I'm just asking is whether or not the people with most power should ask themselves whether they've got this amazing resource which they're actually not quite
utilizing enough.
using.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I'm interested to know how many of you are in TV or film in this room. Are there? There's a few. Okay, we have a few in there. So you've been given your marching orders. So, what are the programs that you think perhaps could have gone even further? You know, they had enough
I've just
of an
done
impact.
a random list.
Yes,
yeah.
can
I've
you?
done a random
Yes.
list.
And why? Should we go through a
Well,
couple
I'll
of
be
them?
very quick, because
Yep.
I know we haven't got much time. But
Yep.
I've just written here, Secret Millionaire,
Yep.
Barbie, Inside Out, 12 Years a Slave, Pride, Amy, Small Axe, I May Destroy You, Sherwood, The Long Shadow, Top Boy, Sex Education. These are all amazing shows, and they achieve the amazing thing of making people passionate,
Yeah.
thinking, and worry.
Yeah. And informed.
But do they then try and transform that into action? I think Barbie could have been the most amazing tool in terms of
Gender equality.
gender equality
Yeah,
and
for sure.
empowerment. There is so much slavery still in the world today.
Yeah.
When they started to make that extraordinary film, 12 Years a Slave, did they do deals? Did they try and get it into education systems?
Yeah.
Did they stop classes in schools being dull on that subject and make it interesting? And my suspicion is,
No.
on the whole, they haven't. So you watch Sherwood, you think, this is fantastic. What can we do about local poverty, about knives in this country, about all the brilliant projects helping young people? No help.
No. At all.
You don't get any help. And I think it's a really interesting time, because I think most people, I remember, when we were young and you saw a program on the telly, what do? You go to your phone and call 911 or what? But now you're watching the TV, most people are watching the TV on devices where they could simply click saying, if you want to take action on this issue, go to this, and you can move. Actually, you've got a nation which could really move
And
fast.
you could see the immediate impact as well.
And there are amazing
Yeah.
examples. So It's a Sin. And again, I don't know whether they pre-did the deal, but once that had been done, I think inquiries into the Terence Higgins fund went up by 300% in the next few weeks. And they put one T-shirt on sale which said "La," which was a sort of quote from that. And they made £500,000 from the sale of that T-shirt. And obviously, we've just had this brilliant example of Mr. Bates against the post office.
fantastic.
Now,
Yeah.
ITV did not deliberately say sign anything, but signatures, went from,
Yeah.
I think, 15,000 to 1 million.
Yeah.
And so people are making these great shows, but I don't know that we're then saying, but wait a minute.
This is the follow-through.
We could make it happen in the real world.
So could you give me an example of the kind of collaboration you think would work post one of those shows?
Well, let me give you that. So there are a couple of people, because I'm just TIP thinking about this. Yeah. But, I would really like you all to look into something called Doc Society, which used to be called Brit Doc. And I remember meeting them about 10 years ago, and they told me there'd been this movie called The Invisible War. And when they made it, which was about rape in the American Armed Forces, and when they made it, they paid Brit Doc, as it was then, for, as it were, an impact officer. And what BritDoc achieved is they had a number of screenings in the Pentagon. Everybody who was running the Pentagon saw it, and now every American soldier, before they sign up, has to watch this film.
Wow.
So there are so many people who made films about serious subjects and then said, I hope. Whereas the question is, if you pre-plan, could you do stuff? And they also, recently they were giving me an example of a film called The Territory, which is about deforestation and taking of lands in South America. And again, they joined the group, they consulted people, they got it out. It's led to massive changes by big companies about what they do on deforestation. It's become, as it were, the symbol, the way that people who are facing the problems there argue. So by pre-planning and saying we're not only making a film and hoping it shows at some festivals, but we're actually turning it into
a movement.
A movement, a weapon for change.
Yes.
So, I mean, those would be real examples. And one of the things I'm particularly interested in is why this doesn't happen with non-fiction. I mean, with fiction.
Yeah.
And I remember talking to Britton, they said, oh no, the filmmakers wouldn't want it, it kind of destroys their purity of purpose and everything like that. And I don't believe that. I think, I mean, Asif was here earlier, I think if Amy could be used as a way of talking to people about drugs and stuff like that, I suspect that he would be extremely interested in that happening. And then the more you talk to people in the film industry, they say, oh yeah, because film people are nervous because they don't want people to watch the films and think, oh, this is a campaigning tool, it has a secret agenda, we don't want to be attracted by the right-wing press. But I think that it would actually be something that filmmakers could really enjoy. And
I wonder how you could then factor that into the sort of award side of things as well. You know, imagine if there was something specific for this at the Oscars or whatever.
Well, and I want to start a conversation with BAFTA about this. So BAFTA have this brilliant thing called ALBA. I mean, BAFTA take the lead so well on, you know, diversity, on representation, and ALBA is their initiative for climate. And I feel there should be an award for the most impactful television series, as it were, and film of the year. And you could actually, so the idea that BritDoc have started to talk about is to have an impact officer, and apparently they've trained an enormous number, and that would be someone who came on at the beginning of a film, at the beginning of a documentary
with
or a TV show, with criteria, with a little bit of money, and actually say, who can we partner with, how can we make it work, how could it be effective? And that becomes a new way of thinking about your work. Not only did it move people, but did it move people to action?
What are the barriers that you think are embedded into the industry that make this harder, or at least seem harder?
Well, I think they are it not being part of the mindset. I mean, I genuinely think, if you look at other businesses, I remember talking to a guy who ran a very major corporation about 5 years ago, and he said, Richard, you know, it's very good, but he was Italian, by the way.
I was just checking.
I mean, he was really Italian. No, but he said, it sounds great, but it's never going to reach the boardroom. And then 3 years later, he said, we talk about it every single board meeting. So I think that there's nervousness, you know, in Channel 4 and in British TV about, we've had very hostile government for a lot of years. This may be about to change. So I think it's nervousness about sort of the law and responsibilities in TV, but it's good to push against that. And in films, I think it's nervousness about commerciality. I think it's nervousness about being seen to be
and
campaigning.
whether an audience wants it.
But
the audience does,
but
particularly a younger
I think the audience
audience.
does. I think so. We're in this really interesting. I don't know how many of you watch After Sun when you finished watching Love Island, or watch an extra slice when you finish. But My daughter doesn't watch Real Housewives any longer. She just watches the Real Housewives, the recap. But there's so much of this where they, as it were, take a thing and then deconstruct it, and it would be so easy and extra programming. And cheap. So I think I think it's not part of the mindset. I don't think there's much money in it. And I think there's a kind of nervousness and not the mechanisms. But I don't know how many of you, as it were, watched I May Destroy You. If you take that program, now I would have thought that iPlayers should have had a program with Michaela and all people who work in this area.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who watch the show would have said, fuck, what can I do? How does this happen? How often does it happen?
And
How can you get over
conversations
it?
around
What's the
sexual
law?
assault,
Yeah,
correct,
exactly.
yeah.
Just have a 20-minute show, and
Yeah.
that show then refer you
On what you can do.
onto what you can
Yeah.
actually do, because, you know, in some ways, the motto of this of Kite Festival might be, Christ, it looks like we're fucked this year, because the world is troublesome more than it was a year ago, more than it was 10 years ago, and one of the answers is public, active involvement in all the issues where we would love to make a difference.